Welcome to The Property Perspective, a podcast by Knight Frank Australia. We'll share expert analysis from industry leaders, focus on key trends and forecasts, and bring you the latest topics shaping Australia's property market.
Welcome to the latest episode of Knight Frank's Property Perspective. My name is Sam Biggins. I'm the National Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences and the Capital Markets team at Knight Frank in Australia. I'm here today and I'm joined with Lawson Katiza and Emma Goodford from our UK business.
I'm Lawson Katiza. I am partner Healthcare, Life Sciences and Consulting. I look after strategic consulting within the Australian office.
I'll start by saying it's been absolutely fantastic having you in the UK this week. I'm Emma Goodford. I'm head of the Knight Frank Life Sciences and Innovation Capability. I'm based here at our head office in Baker Street in London, and I cover predominantly what's known as the Golden Triangle region here in the UK, which is the London, Oxford, Cambridge triangle.
Emma, I'd mirror that and say it's been fantastic to be able to join yourself and the team here over the course of the last week. We're very lucky with our Australian business and the global connectivity of Knight Frank for us to be able to leverage our relationship and the relationship within the firm. Over the course of the last week, we've taken a group of 10 clients across the Golden Triangle, and with your assistance, we've seen some incredible facilities. And I think when Lawson and I look back to the impetus behind putting this tour together, given the relative nascency of life sciences, real estate in Australia, and how embryonic the sector is, we saw a great opportunity to look abroad and look to an established market that is perhaps where Australia might be able to take itself to within the next 5 to 10 years. And when we look at some of the precincts that we've seen, Cambridge, Stevenage, Oxford, across the Golden Triangle and here in London itself, it's been absolutely fascinating. And I think that our clients and our attendees that span that group of both developers, investors, private equity, so GPs, LPs, and then also some of our associates from the built environment space certainly found it an interesting tour. But keen to hear your thoughts and Lawson's thoughts on the differences between where the United Kingdom is now to where the United Kingdom was 5 years ago and some of the leading innovations that you see in this market, and then I guess our perceptions on where we see the Australian market and the opportunities for us as well.
Yeah, and I think just on that global platform piece that you mentioned, Sam, I think we've also got the benefit on our global platform of obviously connecting with our American counterparts too. So, you've come here and you spend a week in the UK, and I'll probably say this time next year, go and spend a week or maybe 2 weeks or possibly even 3 weeks in the key markets in the States. And through our partnership with Cresa, you can learn from that market as well, because, I like to say they're 30 years ahead of the UK. So we can bounce you around the world and really utilise that platform. I think, what we tried to do when we pulled the tour together was make sure that we could find projects that would really resonate with where you are in Australia, in terms of perhaps not-for-profit situations, sort of local government, central government opportunities, together obviously with the private sector projects that we could see, because that would provide some similarities and some semblance of sort of crossover, and then some learning opportunities. So I was calculating last night, I think we've seen very close to about 20 million square feet of projects all in, if you include. We didn't see it all, but when we visit somewhere like Harwell in Oxfordshire, that was 3 million square foot of space with an ambition to take it to 6. So we've taken in a lot of real estate this week.
And Harwell in itself is incredible. 3 million square feet of existing space plus the expansion pipeline. It's a 710 acre campus in alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, the great takeaways from this trip is the fact that we talk about global connections, and Emma, we've obviously we talk regularly on a monthly basis, virtually, and obviously with our Shanghai guys and the guys in San Francisco as well. But to then be able to meet face to face and actually walk through the talk has been fantastic, and something that doesn't happen with many organizations. And I think that's true testimony to the value that we bring to our clients, and being able to actually walk them through that process has been phenomenal. But for me, the trip really, we always talk about, Sam, we always talk about the fact that we've got a massive gap in Australia where, investors have a different mindset to this sector versus what the tenants and the users or the occupiers are looking for. And trying to bridge that gap has been one of the things that we've been trying to do for quite some time. This trip really was sort of the conduit to try and help to do that. And I think we've made significant strides in trying to demonstrate how a more mature ecosystem works, how the feasibility of it works, how to curate the offering and the value proposition that goes with that. But also a good learning aspect that I took out of this was the fact that, as much as, from an Australian context, we talk about urban districts, urban life sciences districts, we've actually realized that the two can coexist. You can have urban ones and you can have, the satellite science parks and the like. Each one does a different thing. Each one has its purpose, has its role to play, and then the cluster effect actually creates that overall ecosystem.
And I think what we've found this week is you tend to find that these, as you would call them precincts and as we would call them clusters, that they all develop and focus on a particular speciality. And certainly in terms of how these clusters evolve, understanding that speciality I think is really important. It's important for the investor, the developer, to understand it so they can build the right sort of product type. And some of these clusters are just sort of, very early stage. They're just developing commercially. And they're coming into existing ecosystems, but they need to find their own identity and sort of find their own feet. And I think there is a difference when certainly here in the UK, when you look at clusters that have been built on the strength of academia, a strong presence of the healthcare sector, and then you sort of intersect the commercial labs that our investor developer clients then want to contribute to that market. You've got to work out exactly what that product should be. Should it be a traditional, in the case of the UK market, CL2 lab? Should it be something that's more tech, hybrid, a bit more flexible, perhaps moving closer towards the innovation sector? We're actually, we've had a shot in the arm here in the UK because of the pandemic. This is a market that even here is still massively evolving, and particularly the market we're sitting in at the moment in London. The commercial lab market here is still relatively modest, but it's one which I think has the most interesting headroom. And it's interesting for two reasons. One is because there will be proper urban lab development, and that's really attractive to talent. So, the graduates that come out of the key universities here can move seamlessly across London because of the great connectivity, and arguably go and work anywhere, but they will congregate in the core science clusters. And the more mature markets of Cambridge, which are focused predominantly on life and physical science, and the markets like Oxford, which have, yes, life and physical science, but they also have advanced engineering, they have deep tech, they have AI, quantum computing, and space and energy, and lots of other exciting things as well. So I think, inevitably there's been, I suspect your clients have had a huge amount of learning. They'll probably go away, distill all the information and everything that they've learned, and have lots of questions. And of course they can come back and ask those questions.
The speculative development concept here is really very obvious, and it is very dominant. In Australia, we find that there's a hesitancy to speculatively develop. And I think coming out of this trip, we've recognized that certainly in a more mature market where there's greater government support, certainly the way that the UK government has, the catapult programs and that massive investment that goes in through, I think it was £8 billion per annum into R&D. You see how that sort of government support helps to underpin that private sector investment. And that was really quite a crucial takeaway.
I think that was a common element across almost every precinct, district development that we visited, was the involvement or collaboration between government and private sector. And in some cases, that might have been because there was a government facility there which the private sector has gone and built adjacent to. If you look at, say, Granta Park, for instance, with the Welding Institute there. Or in other instances, it was a case of more direct involvement with government being part of the capital stack, with both the private sector or perhaps philanthropic interests. And I'm thinking about Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst in that mix. But certainly that's a key takeaway for us in our market, is that there's an opportunity for government and perhaps academia and certainly public health boards for greater collaboration with the private sector. What that collaboration looks like, I think that's best to keep open, but that's definitely a path forward for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're seeing that emerging in Australia.
Yep.
We're seeing through the government, through the Future Fund, the Modern Manufacturing Initiative, through quite a few $1.5 billion into 3 separate programs last year, focused on innovation through the federal government. We're seeing that through the Regional Precincts Partnership Program through government, another $3 billion that's around remote and rural precincts. So those sort of initiatives, I think, are starting to create the underlying ingredients, so the governance, the value propositions, and creating strong partnerships as entities rather than just talk. And I think once we start to see those really become well established, we can start to follow similar pathways to the UK and hopefully start working towards something greater.
I think there have been a couple of imperatives here. We've had a number of economic jolts over the last 10 to 15 years here, and I think the government is very aware of how science contributes to economic growth, and if they make that investment, then the contribution that the science sector makes to the economy is considerable. We have the NHS here. That again is a unique facility globally, and it's equally an institution that demands an awful lot of cash, but it can participate in things like clinical trials. It provides the data that globally so many businesses want to try to access, again for things like clinical trial purposes. And I think the government here have absolutely recognised that. They've also recognised the need for infrastructure, for power, for connectivity. So in terms of creating links between Oxford and Cambridge, with a train line that's going through the Arc at the moment. And the need particularly to provide resilient power is something else that only in the case of the UK only government can provide, really, in terms of that infrastructure.
Certainly from the tour at Harwell yesterday, the ARC facility, the need for reliable baseload power. The particle beam accelerator draws 6,000 amps when that thing fires up, and this is the site of the first nuclear reactor in Europe in the 1940s, but some very intelligent people, and common point of feedback was we need solid access to power. And as we look at renewables and our own energy mix in Australia, if we want to take ourselves forward in the life sciences sector, that's something to consider. I think that one of the other common themes from every project that we visited, and this is of a fairly broad geographic range, was amenity. All of the successful projects that we saw had a very high level of amenity on site to attract talent, and there's a war for talent across every sector at the moment, and certainly the amenities that were being provided by some of the developers, going beyond things like the token vending machines and cafes, but on-site childcare, top-tier health clubs, wellness was certainly a theme, which was recurring. Accessibility, both public transport, but also cycling. A big focus on ESG for transportation. I think that, to my mind, the first time I've seen a PV wall was, again, at Stevenage yesterday, but that's a great initiative. And if you put that in Australian context, we have no shortage of sunlight. So north-facing walls on buildings are a great opportunity for us to contribute to an embedded network in a park or in an asset.
Yeah, it certainly demonstrates that life sciences as an asset class is certainly borrowing some of those common themes in terms of how you curate, how you manage precincts, and the value that the users bring to those locations. But the other strong theme that I picked up as well was I come back to governance all the time, but that the operational governance, if you look at, say, Granta Park with Biomed Realty, and how they have a wider ownership of the precinct and the flexibility that it gives them in terms of how they manage the occupiers within that precinct, whether it's the grow on, the graduation, and being able to complement the user's requirements in a single location, that creates the stickiness from the occupiers that helps to underpin the ecosystem. And they won't want to leave, they'll want to stay, they want to grow in that precinct with all the things that made them come there in the first place, staying.
And also being selective about who they accept. So looking only for groups that are going to be contributing towards the broader ecosystem.
Collaborating.
Yeah, collaboration, very much so. And that was a recurring theme across White City. It was at Cambridge, it was at Granta Park.
Yeah.
That was certainly at Stevenage in the Bioscience Catalyst again.
I'm keen on both your thoughts about, we obviously went to Canary Wharf, Cadence, which is 60,000 square meters or 80,000 square meters of life sciences space, speculatively developed to cater for a massive audience. Now, to put that into perspective, I think they said that collectively Cambridge and Oxford are roughly 60,000 square meters as well. How do you think that sort of an asset will work in the market or complement the market?
I think its scale is enormous, obviously. It's equally being developed in one of the newly emerging clusters in London. And I think its scale is a positive on that basis, because it probably reaches actually beyond UK boundaries. It will be a lab that will be looked at across Europe, I suspect, as being technically superior and certainly from a scale point of view superior. I think they will be establishing during the build exactly its focus and what the message will be to various different science subsectors in the market in terms of really who they want and what they want to focus on. It's not all about size, but my view will be that if there are two people probably in this industry that can make something like that successful, it is probably the Canary Wharf Group and the global reputation they have, which ultimately goes up to Brookfield effectively, and Cadence as a operator that have now, I think, 26 facilities across Europe. So again, coming back to your point on collaboration, you don't just take space at Canary Wharf, but you'll be taking space within the Cadence network. And that gives you access to people that might be in your science, let's say in Amsterdam or in France or in Germany. And that collaborative base stretches way beyond the physical real estate that your business and your people are occupying. So I think, certainly Canary as an emerging cluster needs to see, I think, very significant commitment to kind of turn heads. I think you've got to remember that the total commercial lab stock in London is less than 1 million square feet. So whilst there is a lot of academic laboratory space and healthcare related research and laboratory space, the actual market is much smaller than Cambridge at the moment. So, yes, as you say, it will add a huge volume to the pipeline that's being delivered at the moment. Just coming back to your point, Sam, we move quite quickly away from sort of those things that are needed to make an ecosystem work. And I think two of the other things that certainly our government here are wrestling with is venture and how venture particularly has massively driven the growth of biotech through COVID. So the universities are commercialising IP and that's demanding venture. And are we in the UK and will you in Australia provide the right sort of environment for that venture to want to invest? And secondly, I think having a stock market that's good for IPOs, and that is one of the challenges. A lot of these businesses are getting venture from the States, and therefore that naturally might attract those businesses as they grow into that geography. And equally, they're looking at the UK Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, and saying, is this the best place for my business to list when we get to that point, which obviously will be typically a few years later. Or is the Nasdaq a better bet? So, the Australian government, again, it's not just about making investments, making funds aware, creating the right tax breaks, putting partnerships and collaborations in place. It is also about making sure that the finances, if you like, that drive everything, or drive so much, particularly in the biotech sector, are created to be really favourable. I think it's super exciting for Australia because to some extent you can travel the world looking at all the best exemplars and then you can just cut to the chase and get into it and be super successful without making all the mistakes that everybody else has made.
So I think we're very keen to travel the world and look at all the best exemplars, Emma.
I think I made the example to you, Emma, about how sometimes you can miss the telephone and go straight to the mobile phone. And I think you learn from all the mistakes that others have made, and you benefit from that next phase of the evolutionary cycle. The other thing I wanted to just talk about was, we went to Victoria House, which is a Grade 2 heritage listed facility, enormous scale, and how they've managed to, or working towards, integrating a life science offering and curating an ecosystem that is slightly different to the others. Do you want to talk a bit more to that, Emma?
Yeah, sure. So Victoria House, just to set some context for our listeners, Victoria House is an asset of just under 300,000 square feet, and as Lawson says, it's listed, which basically means the government imposes some design restrictions and practical restrictions on what can happen to the building, because it's a beautiful building. It was built in, I think, 1924. It has a ballroom in its basement, which is used as a conference facility. So it's got some really unique features. It's in the southern area of the Knowledge Quarter, which is the probably the prime science district and innovation district in London, and we must come back and mention that actually in a little while. And I think it's unique, so it's unusual. It's a repurposed asset, and one of the attractions of that is that the owners, who are Oxford Properties, with an operator known as Pioneer, they can get the asset into the market quite quickly. And certainly speed to market has been something that's been very important to grab the demand that's out there at the moment. They are creating a variety of different spaces. So they are creating a lounge, for example, for their occupiers in the building. They're creating an early incubator facility that will literally be, sign an agreement on a Monday, start your science at 11 o'clock that morning, and you can go straight in, put a lab coat on and get straight on with it. They will have grow on space and then space to allow businesses to accelerate and grow and accommodate much larger businesses. So, within that one facility of nearly 300,000 square feet, you'll see the whole life cycle of a company potentially. They have the Bioinnovation Association, which is a network of biotech companies across the UK, has about 900 members. They have the BIA based there, so that's incredibly attractive because, of course, they host events and meetings and bring their network into Victoria House, and I think it will be really successful. It's very close to something known as Great Ormond Street Hospital, well-renowned hospital for children's health, the Zaid Institute, which is a research institute, again dedicated to childhood diseases, children's diseases, again is very close, but it also has quite an agglomeration of venture businesses based in that area. So I think this is a building that's going to be into the market by next year, middle of next year. And I think it will be that there's a certain attraction to buildings that sort of look a little bit like the academic building you might have occupied or done your science in at university. And I think to some extent, people that visit there will have that sort of emotional reaction to it, as well as see a fantastic technical asset that will work very well for their operations. And
it also really demonstrates that not every life sciences asset has to be brand new. Or purpose designed, that you can actually retrofit some of these elements. The fact that within that building there was no additional structural reinforcement that they had to do. The fact that, within the heritage classifications, all they had to do was punch out the roof just a little bit more. They had the advantage of being the highest building in the area as well. The fact that they could actually make the operational components, the delivery of liquid nitrogen within the facility through the basement, all of those elements just show that you can take an existing asset and make it work. Sure, some assets won't have the right ceiling heights, won't have the right vibration qualities, may not have the water, but there are some that actually could work. And we're seeing obviously a wave globally of shopping centers being converted to life sciences as well, because they already have those qualities.
I think you touched on a really good point there, Lawson, and that's about adaptive reuse of existing buildings. And, as globally the property sector becomes more conscious of ESG and sustainability and embodied carbon, looking at some of the projects that we've just seen over the course of the last week, Victoria House is a great example, and I'll be the first to admit I have a soft spot for buildings of that vintage. But also thinking about, again, one of Cadenza's projects, Sycamore House, out at Stevenage. And that was previously a warehouse, which had been adapted into a life sciences facility, co-lab, labs for hire. Plus also what I thought was fascinating about that particular asset was the incorporation of a training facility. So they can actually run what in Australia we'd call an RTO, but do training courses for lab handling, laboratory and sensitive logistics. It goes beyond manufacturing, absolutely, the processes and the opportunity to build a skills base through these types of facilities in our market. And it goes beyond needing to have a science degree, because there's a lot of people who work in the ecosystem that may not have a science degree, but certainly having awareness of how to operate in a lab environment and work with the infrastructure and the materials and the handling of those materials and pieces of equipment is essential. And I thought that Sycamore was a great example of that. And I know that we were very fortunate to have a session with Gensler yesterday evening and looking at some of the design suggestions that they had, with the improvements in technology, things like portable fume hoods or portable workbenches wherein you may not need to have extraction infrastructure in the ceiling space, or lab requirements having lower hourly ACHs than was previously thought. You can get away with 6 to 8 ACHs, air changes per hour, in some spaces, and therefore the size of the ducting, instead of being 1,000 by 1,400 duct, might be a 750 by 1,000 duct, which means that you can actually refit an office building potentially, or a suburban office building like we see in precincts such as Macquarie Park or 8 Mile Plains in Brisbane, or indeed parts of suburban Melbourne. Some of those buildings that may not have, say, 4 metre plus slab to slab height can actually be refit and still work quite effectively as lab space.
It's probably worth remembering here in the UK that most of the lab stock is actually within academic accommodation, and a lot of that academic accommodation is old. If you look at Oxford University, yes, it's got its very modern science faculty buildings, but a lot of the labs are actually in old buildings, some of which date back hundreds of years and manage to function perfectly successfully. So, I think adaptive reuse, particularly here in the UK, that's been a real feature in the last 2 or 3 years as people have wanted to get stock into the market quickly.
And to your point, Emma, I think the other thing to recognise is, most of the districts or precincts within Australia, if not close to 90% of them, they tend to be government-led or on government land or university land or combination of the two. That in itself is great for certainly the discovery side of things and that early incubation element. This trip and the tour was really about that next phase beyond discovery, which is the commercialization of research. And that's the element where it gets tricky, certainly from an Australian perspective, to start to try and develop those commercialization assets through private investment on land with a different tenure or that you can't control. And so that's another element that we're trying to grapple with in Australia. I think Bogger Road Innovation Precinct, which is now controlled by QIC in Brisbane, will be one of those that we'll be looking at very closely to see how you can transform an asset from government control to private control and encourage that development to happen at scale, certainly from a commercialization perspective.
Yeah. And talking about scale, and bringing it back to the Knowledge Quarter here in London, we haven't mentioned the Crick Institute that we were lucky enough to visit. And just for our listeners, this is an institute in the heart of the Knowledge Quarter, very close to King's Cross. We also had a tour of the King's Cross estate, which was absolutely fascinating. But the Crick is 1 million square feet, a little bit more than 1 million square feet. It is as tall above the ground as it is below the ground. And in fact, I think we probably all found that what was underneath and in its 4 levels of basement was as interesting as the laboratory space that was occupied above it. It has that sort of, I'm not going to say government, but that philanthropic aspect to it, which is it is fundamentally funded by Cancer Research, a charity, and the Wellcome Trust as two of the principal stakeholders. It has 14 science quadrants and encourages people to come in with a good research idea and take space for up to 12 years. And it's absolutely full to bursting. And I went away and I called it the Cathedral of Science. But for me, I mean, that was, I think, the highlight of the week in terms of the tour. An absolutely fascinating building. And I think one that shows really the importance of how collaboration is really at the heartbeat of this industry. How those charities and those philanthropic organisations really drive the future of science through the research that they enable.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the CRIC. It's one of those that I've certainly benchmarked and case studied a lot in sort of the work that I've been doing across Australia. But the fact, and also to put it into perspective, you mentioned it's a million square feet, which is roughly 100,000 square meters. Our equivalent of that would be the Translational Research Institute, which is approximately 34,000 square meters, and we thought that was huge. So, the scale of everything that we've seen is on another level here in the UK. That's testament to how advanced the market is. Obviously, there's critical mass and population and level of investment that's available. But what a good takeaway for us would probably be the fact that, life sciences isn't just the human health side. It's also an extension through to plant sciences, marine sciences. Now, Australia's got the most advanced marine research institute, which is Australian Institute of Marine Sciences in the world. And that's something that we can use as our point of difference and an area that we can certainly grow a specialization and a commercialization aspect going forward.
I'd also add to that areas that we're quite strong in, food tech and food science. And certainly we saw a number of facilities this week which focus purely on those aspects of life sciences. And given Australia's strengths in food production, where clean and green are certainly key selling points for our fresh produce. It's a major sector that we play in globally. There's an opportunity there for us as well.
Talk a little bit about Harwell as well, which was, I found it fascinating that you can have so many different parts of science all in the one precinct. And yes, part of that has been sort of, cumulative over time, from being a military air base right through to what it is now. So you got the space technology, you've got you've got the synchrotron there, you got advanced manufacturing analysis. It's all there in the one precinct. But the fact that all those elements sort of bounce off each other as well, that you can build on what's there across multiple disciplines, and that's something that I think we can build on in Australia. Monash cluster sort of, for me, resonates similar to that. And I know we Sam, we talk about Bogor Road Innovation Precinct and how, it's got the one side which is more your traditional, human health, life sciences. And then across the railway, we've got eco-sciences and CSIRO doing the biofuels and the bioeconomy side of things. And how you can have a precinct that has those differences but actually make them work and make that collaboration a bit better. That's a challenge we have.
One term which struck me, and it was actually mentioned at Scale Space, is the concept of accidental collision, in terms of the design of facilities. And it was a recurring theme across every facility that we looked at as far as collaboration, communal spaces. But even down to the design of the buildings, having one way in and one way out, same way out, the same way in that people have no choice but to bump into each other, with the idea that helps breed innovation discussions that might not otherwise happen if you're locked away in a room or locked away in a laboratory with the door closed.
And I think you are seeing this because of, as I said earlier, the collision between science and technology, digital, AI, data. These things are all blending and merging, blurring, if you like. And so if you put people in those same environments and you mix them together, probably that blurring will happen more quickly.
The other common point which came back from each facility is that if they're looking to expand within their existing footprints, then they're looking to reduce the amount of office space and expand the laboratory space. And to your point about greater reliance upon AI or incorporation of AI into write-ups and data analysis, most of the facilities that we looked at are focusing more closely on bringing AI into their processes and also making the tenants more able to access it.
The level of risk taking that occurs in life sciences. You don't go into life sciences to try and play it as your traditional office space. And it's interesting that here in the UK, you're seeing a premium on rents in life sciences of close to between 20 and 40%, depending on the type of asset. So the risk does have its rewards. And the risk is not just necessarily in the financial investment, it's also the risk in how you create those ecosystems as well. So I found that really a significant learning that we'll certainly take or try to encourage a lot more in Australia.
Yeah, it's very calculated risk to some extent because yes, the investment into the real estate, the bricks and mortar is more expensive because of the nature, the more complex nature of the building. That demands a rental premium. Many of the buildings, particularly as Sam mentioned a minute ago, for smaller companies, demand fitting, servicing, etc. The other thing I think that we've learned quite quickly here is the significance of operation, and as we came through the pandemic, I think everybody thought, I'll do a bit of life sciences, and then actually they realised that this is a specialist sector. It's obviously a sector that demands a lot of regulation and compliance, as well as operational complexity. But this is not for everybody, and I think those funds who are partnering here with operators are delivering better assets, and many people have come, they've looked, and they've said, nah, it's not for us, and that's fine. Which means that we will hopefully have a spec product delivered that is really fit for purpose and that will be very well operated, both within the asset and in terms of the networks that it might also create and link into. So,
yeah, and I just wanted to also go back to a point that Sam made earlier on, which was all about training, and the fact that the whole UK government spending on the catapults has been has had many layers, and one of those layers was actually the apprenticeship training of setting up apprentices for life sciences in CGMP and other elements, and that in itself demonstrates that it's not just about the scientists. Absolutely, it's about all those other layers and how you can actually bring in various various levels of education to the sector is quite an important aspect.
Yeah, which creates a lot of social value, I think, for investors and projects that are very focused in that particular area. The S, if you like, of ESG.
Yeah, it creates a lot of social value. Also creates a lot of opportunity, and it creates a lot of capability.
Absolutely. So, go in from here, Sam. What are we looking at doing and pushing in terms of how we support our clients moving forward?
Well, we've been very fortunate to have the support of our clients to go through this exercise, and I think the overwhelming feedback from the groups that we were fortunate enough to have in attendance has been that it's been a really insightful initiative to be involved with, and certainly from the Knight Frank perspective and from us, Lawson and Emma, I know that we're keen to focus on the next iteration of this. And there is so much that we can learn from global markets that are established. Some of those are at a scale which is well beyond where our marketplace is at the moment, but notwithstanding that, there's still principles, urban design principles, economic models, capital structuring models, which can be applied across all facets of the sector in Australia. And I'm very much looking forward to the next phase in our local market cycle. And if I'm honest, I'm also very much looking forward to our next study tour.
And I think the other thing I'm looking forward to is our networks within life sciences, showing them all the learnings that we've managed to all the things that we've learnt along this journey. So that's something I'm looking forward to actually, sharing that information. And
it's a really good point, Lawson. And for those that are listening, we will be looking to conduct a series across the eastern coast, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. We're looking forward to engaging with our clients and our supporters and industry in an open forum discussion on how we can progress the sector in Australia.
What I tend to find after these sort of tours is that you go away, and in your case, as you fly home, you suddenly think, I didn't ask this, or I could have asked that, or could we explore this in a bit more detail? And the nice thing is, because our network is so open and we're unsiloed and we all talk to each other, just come back and ask questions, or if there's areas that you want to fill in or tackle and discuss a little bit more, we can do that. And if we don't know the answers, we can go to the States and we can look at exemplars over there and learn from their model. But I certainly think this connectivity that we have across our business is incredibly valuable and something that we can share with all our clients.
It's been fantastic, Emma, and the support from our Knight Frank network has been tremendous and really made this so much easier. And our group of attendees were awed about were in awe about the fact that it looks so seamless. And that's something I think it's credit to the networking that we have within the organisation and how we can carry this forward.
Yeah, one of our points of difference. Yeah, well, no, it's been great having you here in the UK this week, and thank you for making the trip, because it's a big journey. But let's set up the next one. Go again.
Absolutely.
Lots to learn still.
Thank you, Emma.
Before you go, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on the next episode of The Property Perspective, when we'll be back to share our take on more key trends and topics shaping Australia's property market. You can also follow us on LinkedIn or visit our website at knightfrank.com.au for more information. Thanks for tuning in. It may be the end of the show, but we're always your partners in property.